Hello. Thank you for watching our presentation, Under Pressure, Rethinking How We Teach Plagiarism. Our title is a direct reference to the Queen and David Bowie song, or maybe the My Chemical Romance and the Used cover, depending on your generational music interests. Also, we realize after the fact, it's fitting that this discussion of plagiarism is prefaced by a song that was once the focus of a major intellectual property dispute.
If you're watching this presentation as part of its initial run in the ACRL 2021 virtual conference, we will be available for a short live Q&A session immediately following this recording. If you're watching this at a later point in time, you're welcome to reach out to either of us directly with any questions or thoughts. So let's quickly go over what we'll be discussing today.
This presentation was initially proposed as a contributed conference paper in early 2020. Due to the ongoing global pandemic, dates in general have been understandably fluid and relative. So with that said, at the time of this recording, we have every intention of completing our paper by the start of ACRL 2021, but that paper is still very much in nebulous draft form.
While we hope to delve deeper into the traditional approach to teaching plagiarism in that paper, today's talk will be action-oriented and practitioner-focused. This is a discussion where we will briefly address who we are as scholars and practitioners, why we are here talking about plagiarism instruction, even though we're not currently working in academic libraries, what exactly we mean when we refer to the downside of traditional plagiarism instruction, and what we believe are some clear and actionable steps for practitioners to take now in bettering their teaching. We'll also talk a little bit about where we would ideally like to see proper credit and attribution shift towards.
In answer to who we are, my name is Natalie Hill. I am currently an instructional designer with the University of New England's College of Graduate and Professional Studies. My work involves creating fully online asynchronous learning experiences for graduate and professional level students. Most recently, I was the open education librarian and a diversity resident librarian with Laura at the University of Texas Libraries. In general, my professional and academic interests have always been in how we as humans value, collect, preserve, and disseminate information, whether that's been through electronic records, archives, or scholarly communications. And I think the notion of proper credit and attribution is inherently tied up in all of that.
My name is Laura Tadena. I currently work with the Texas State Library and Archives Commission as an equity and inclusion consultant. My background is in education as a K-12 educator and school librarian, as well as an academic librarian. I've been able to get a unique view of how we approach instruction in libraries, especially when it comes to historically underserved population. I focused on equitable learning opportunities, advancement potential for BIPOC groups in LIS, instructional design for continuing education, and creating truly inclusive library services, programming, and spaces.
In terms of this specific topic of plagiarism, my supervisor floated the idea in early 2020 of reimagining our college's new student orientation experience with a large caveat that there was a strong interest in increasing focus on academic integrity. I have never been a dedicated instruction librarian, and maybe part of the reason for that is that I hate the concept of focusing so much attention on something that I don't believe is that widespread of an issue, but I saw an opportunity to challenge how we've taught citation and to put my own framing on this topic, hopefully to the benefit of our students. And Laura graciously agreed to join me in this theorizing of what it would mean to take a feminist, anti-racist, and equity-informed look at how we teach plagiarism as information professionals.
So why are we here? What do we mean when we say plagiarism? There are many different definitions of plagiarism, but to use a simple one from Oxford Languages, plagiarism is, quote, the practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as your own, end quote.
In academic settings, we can extend this definition to the concept of self-plagiarism, or failing to cite your own past work, which is typically disallowed in coursework. The thought process behind that, we assume, is that we as university workers and educators want students to continue to grow in their learning and to engage with similar topics in new and deeper ways throughout their studies. Anti-plagiarism instruction, a very brief overview. Currently, I would categorize anti-plagiarism efforts as exclusively or predominantly compliance-driven, depending on the organization. We all have academic integrity or academic dishonesty policies, and we put them on every syllabus. We make students, staff, and faculty check boxes acknowledging they've read and understood these policies and will follow the rules set forth in them. There's no room for discussion here, no room for context. It's a list of things not to do, and compliance is expected.
This is a really harmful way to begin a relationship with new students and with transfer students. We haven't earned their trust yet, and we're using our default authority positions to tell them what to do and what not to do. A lot of them are coming from K-12 systems where they've been made to conform, and they're starting in higher education with hopes of something different, and that's not what we're giving them. And as librarians, we also typically approach instruction through one-shot encounters. We point to LibGuides that someone created with details on citation styles and plagiarism, but we don't get into how or the why of citation.
We believe that traditional anti-plagiarism measures are punitive, harmful, and widespread. We have this tweet from Academic Chatter stating, quote, "Academia takes plagiarism more seriously than racism," unquote. And if we're going by budgetary decision making, that is absolutely correct. Followed with this tweet from Matt Dowell, an English faculty member, stating, quote, "Why, if every university is so trusting of student behavior as it relates to preventing viral spread, do they all spend so much on plagiarism detection and proctoring software? Yes, I am yelling," unquote. And we should be yelling about it, because it's ridiculous that we, as university workers, are putting the responsibility of community health and safety in the hands of college students that we've made live in highly communal spaces when we don't even trust them to use their own words and not to cheat on assignments.
We probably have a lot more instances of students being investigated in academic misconduct hearings than we do in disciplinary actions related to reports of widespread racism or sexism or prejudice. And from an instruction librarian, Symphony B, quote, "Nitpicking citations as an opportunity to dock points from students' work, especially when they are submitting an entire paper product at the same time, causes students unnecessary harm," unquote. Yes, what is the actual goal of learning? Is it to accurately place a comma, or is it more than that? Did you address the prompt? Did you contribute something new to an area of scholarship? Did you display personal growth?
We believe that proper credit is far more than following a citation style, and that citation without context is a lesson in failure. There's no learning when you're asking for rote memorization, no critical thinking or engagement on the part of the student. A tweet from Amber Pierdenach, a community college librarian, stating, quote, "I feel like putting into context why we cite information can help students understand so much more, because citing information and giving credit to authors is so much more than proper comma placement," unquote. I agree wholeheartedly.
And from Carrie Wade, an academic librarian, quote, "Non-librarian academic tries to bait me. Chicago is a bullshit citation style. Librarian me. All citation styles are bullshit." I agree. Citation styles are a way for publishers to profit off of labor of researchers and provide little opportunity for learning opportunities. Students are spending hours getting their papers formatted to correct style instead of using that time to continue to further their argument.
And in direct response to Carrie's tweet, we have one from Josh Bolick, a scholarly communications librarian, stating, quote, "I got tisk-tissed in a recent review of CV for not having perfect APA style because we teach how to cite properly. I do not and will not. I'd be happy to teach politics of citations, but not styles themselves," unquote. I feel a lot of myself personally in that statement, and it draws us nicely into what we think we as practitioners can do now to improve this compliance-driven instructional tradition. We need to start talking about citation as a political act, because citation is a political act. Record keeping, documenting, and archiving are not neutral acts. Step one is to stop pretending or tolerating the belief that citation is just a neutral thing that we do, because that's not the case. From Cite Black Women, quote, "Citation practices really do tell us a lot about people's politics," unquote. We agree with this, and we hope our citations throughout this presentation, and hopefully throughout the paper that we write, demonstrate that belief.
Expose disparity. Ask students to critically examine how citation practices reinforce inequities within the scholarship community, primarily among women and people of color. We have seen that historically, white males are published the most and as a result are cited the most. We should teach students to recognize that who we choose to cite gives those voices powers. From Dorothy Berry, a digital archives professional, quote, "If I hear one more time that the reason librarianship is 85% plus white is because Black people are incapable of getting an MLS, so we need to, quote, lower standards, I'm gonna have to start screaming in, quote, Black women are the most formally educated folks in the US, end quote," which is true. Proportionately, Black women are demonstrating that in terms of attaining higher education, and that is not at all reflected in citation measures or published scholarship. That is not coincidental. It is intentional, and it is a reoccurring cycle of erasure.
So how do we do something about that? We start challenging the existing canon of scholarship for whatever discipline you're in. You can see we're focusing heavily on LIS right now. And we teach students that when we cite someone, we're prioritizing their voices, allowing them to be heard. When we withhold credit, we're effectively silencing them. Who is it that we continue to erase? From Tomas Padilla, quote, "Digital humanist. We notice when you fail to cite your librarian and archivist colleagues. The sustained erasure is truly wild," unquote. We experience this erasure regularly as LIS practitioners, and we all carry out this erasure in various ways. We need to switch to an education-driven instruction model. We're no longer telling students not to do something, but we're informing students of why attribution exists and how they can begin to form their own opinions around it. We should emphasize the labor rights of creators, especially historically and presently marginalized and minoritized creators.
We should put an emphasis on how to functionally attribute information and stop getting so caught up in specific comma placement and enforcing citation styles. We need to start truly interrogating power, and that's from the perspective of librarians and faculty as ultimate power authorities over students and disempowering students in their own decision-making, writing, and scholarship. That's also in who's been cited historically, who continues to benefit from that citation and through tenure and promotional opportunities.
Michelle Caswell, archival studies professor, tweets, quote, "Reading a book where the male author thanks his wife for the innumerable ways he contributed to its final form and content. Can I just cite her instead?" Unquote. Honestly, we probably should. Who continues to get away with plagiarism without consequences? This isn't something that ends with students. We hear about working professionals, respected individuals who've plagiarized large swaths of information, and there's usually a power dynamic at play. It's often white men plagiarizing the works of junior scholars, women, and people from global majority backgrounds.
So where do we want to go? We propose we want to go towards a more relational approach to teaching credit and attribution. Natalie is currently reading Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde and shared this quote from an interview between Lorde and Adrienne Rich.
Quote, "That's when I learned how important grammar is, that part of the understanding process is grammatical. That's how I taught myself to write prose. I kept learning and learning, emphasis mine. I'd come into class and say, guess what I found out last night? Tenses are a way of ordering the chaos around time. I learned that grammar was not arbitrary, that it served a purpose, that it helped to form the ways we thought, that it could be freeing as well as restrictive. And I sensed again how as children we learned this and why. It's like driving a car. Once we know it, we can choose to discard it or use it, but you can't know if it has useful or destructive power until you have a handle on it, unquote. While Lord is talking explicitly about grammar here, I say we can directly bring this to citation, credit, and attribution. We know we teach citation out of context. We don't say why we do it. We're missing the political factor, how it helps us to make sense of our world.
Bringing it in this context can help our students understand the reasoning behind citation styles and information retrieval. We take away students' agencies in being informed decision makers, of knowing why they're doing something and having a choice of following it or non-compliant. We can also take this opportunity to relate to students and to show them that even though we are authority figures and that we have achieved status in our profession, that we are also still learning right alongside them.
We think through this relational approach to teaching credit and attribution that we can empower students as scholars. The ACRL framework for information literacy is a tool we can use to put this into practice. We suggest an informed consent model where students are actually aware of all the benefits and downsides of choosing how and when they cite.
Hopefully, this results in not just critical consumers of information, but truly critical creators who take ownership over their words and who acknowledge the contributions of the works that have influenced them. We hope that using a relational approach to teaching, we impact their work going forward so that they can continue to do so and do this outside of the academic classroom.
Thank you for listening. This reference list includes not just directly cited works from our presentation, but attempts to accurately capture the works that have really influenced our thinking and framing throughout this project.